Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chairman, Global Change Limited, Patric Dixon.
Your Excellencies, respected audience, firstly my condolences on the passing of King Abdullah, and it is a privilege to be present in this country at this time and to honor all his achievements. And may this wonderful kingdom see many generations of prosperity and peace. It's a great privilege to be here again in this country, and if I can have my first slide, please. I would like to take us on a journey into the future and to ask a question about where the next generation of 2 million jobs might come from. We've heard about tremendous progress, challenges, and opportunities, but where will the next 2 million come from? Not just jobs for people, but for people who were born in Saudi Arabia. And I want to share some perspectives on that. I want to suggest to you that there is one word that will drive the future more than any other. One word that is more fundamental than economics, more fundamental than politics or technology, more important than innovation. This single word will drive the whole of the next 10 to 20 years of job creation in different ways. What is that? What is this single connecting word? I'll come back to that in a moment. But you know what? Things change in our world. Stuff happens. And whatever is going to be our policies on job creation in the future, we are having to face extraordinary uncertainties. And it doesn't matter if you're a shipper or an airline. What was it that caused 70% of the entire world's chip memory manufacturers to place their entire production in the same nation, in the same floodplain where they experienced the same disaster? Events connect with other events. We see political events shaking worlds not so very far from here. Here is a 20-second event that took place in Japan. It was followed by another 20-second event, which of course was a nuclear crack. As a result of 40 seconds of human history, 40 years of energy policy was changed in Germany, in the United States, in Europe, and so on. As a result of a decision made by Russia to take Crimea, we saw 40 years of energy policy in the European Union change regarding gas. So our worlds change at astonishing speed. Only 5 years ago, we had the gas industry telling us that they thought that the gas supply of the world would run out within 60 years. What nonsense, of course, that was. 5 years later, we revised it up to 200 years, and I think we agree probably it's still wrong. Maybe it should be 400 years with another 5 years of technology and another innovation. That entire jump from 60 years reserves of gas to 200 years of reserves of gas was a result of a single innovation in a single territory over 60 months. So as a result of all of this, what I would say is that strategies are getting overtaken by events. And it might be that you're responsible for a strategy within the Ministry of Economy or Economics. It might be within education. It might be within petrochemicals. But I would say that most of my multinational clients are finding that events are overtaking five-year plans. And so we are needing to develop greater agility. And agility will be, I believe, a number one mechanism of creating jobs for the future. It's countries and people, companies that are able to think beyond one strategy, who have more than one plan. They have plan A, but they also have plan B. Plan B is, what if Russia takes the rest of Ukraine? You might say, very unlikely, but we have a plan just in case. Always thinking ahead, always looking beyond. I just want to make one comment about the global economy. Watching too much TV news can make you physically sick. Did you know that? I tell you it's true. I'm a physician in my first training. And what we see on the TV is, of course, fiction. It's a version of reality, but it's not the truth. This is the truth. This is 1980 through to 2013, and it shows the truth, which, of course, you know here in Saudi, which is while the world talked of global chaos and meltdown, the truth was that regions like this, and indeed most of humanity, continue to live in areas that were relatively unaffected. That's the truth. The truth is that, of course, when you look at the average, we've discovered that the global economy never stopped growing except maybe for about 6 weeks. That was the truth. The truth is the United States from 1980 to 2013 did blip, but we're back. The truth is the European Union, yes, we are on the edge of deflation. Yes, the patient is at risk in the intensive care unit and may need to go back to theatre for another operation. We call it quantitative easing, and the operation is mouse clicks. Every mouse click creates another 60 billion euros in the European Central Bank. We will do one mouse click every month forever until inflation comes back to around 2%. That's the truth. Now, what will happen to all that money? Contrast this with the Vietnam. I mean, this is Vietnam 1985 to 2011. Can we spot the crisis? I can show you similar graphs for many of the economies with which you trade, for whom this global catastrophe was a mere illusion. And of course, the same would be true of this great kingdom, where you have seen relentless scientific, economic, and technological miracles over the last 50 years. Astonishing progress in every sector of society. A way that puts to shame countries like mine in the United Kingdom, or France, or Germany, that could not imagine such a gigantic transformation of every aspect of society. And yet, here is another truth, a truth which is that every country in the world that has particular wealth from oil or minerals has a particular competitive challenge, which is that, of course, the more stuff you sell, the higher the currency goes. The higher the currency goes, the more difficult it is for other businesses to compete. I have some friends in Uganda. On the day that Uganda struck oil, my heart sank. Why? Because I knew that in their businesses, the moment the oil started to come out of the country, the exchange rate would rise and their businesses would become a little bit less competitive. So my friends have to work much harder than otherwise if there was no oil. Now, that doesn't mean that it has a permanent effect. It just means it's like sailing into the wind. It's a little bit of extra pressure on a business in an oil-wealthy economy. And I'm going to come back to how we overcome that, I believe, as you already are in this great nation. But here is another truth. As you know, as we heard throughout today, 40% of all global wealth created this year will be created in Asia alone, and we've only just started. Here is another truth. The Chinese government alone is sitting on $3.4 trillion of reserves. Most of that is of sovereign wealth. Most of that is US government debt. The big challenge is what to do with it next. I cannot imagine that most of this Chinese money will remain in US government bonds for very long. It will come into places like Saudi to buy all kinds of things, maybe real estate, maybe a biotech company, maybe a petrochemical downstream company, maybe an IT partnership. It will come into London, it will come into Nigeria, it will come into Congo, anywhere but US government bonds, of which they have too many. Now, here is another truth. There's another group of people that are sitting on a lot of cash, which will drive the recovery of the whole of the world. It's here. If you look at the largest 2,000 companies in the world, they too are sitting on mountains of cash, around $2.4 trillion of cash, which has been sitting there because despite what the TV news makes you think, these companies every year through the darkest days of the recession have continued to engineer cash. They just haven't known how to spend it. So they have saved it for a great day when they feel confident again to invest in marketing, in new factories, new products, new initiatives. So we have, just between the Chinese and some companies like this, we have a future engine of growth of at least $6 trillion. And I'm not even talking about the sovereign wealth of the great kingdom here. I'm not talking about the Norwegians, the Singaporeans, the Russians, and others. There's money there. But there's one word which has held all this money back. What is the single word that drives the future more than anything else? So when we put all these things together, what we see is this: that measures to prevent deflation, like printing 60 billion new euros every month, like printing so many pounds in my country that we have managed to buy 1/3 of our entire national debt on an Excel spreadsheet. But these kinds of experiments to fight deflation or to protect from deflation are bound eventually to add to the strength of recovery when it comes, which will lead, of course, to, after the world's longest downturn in many generations, inevitably to one of the longest upturns and the biggest boom you can possibly imagine. So I am expecting a degree of economic instability to last 5 or 10 or maybe even longer years. And when that recovery comes, if the oil prices remain as low as they are, it will come back with reduced production because some of the shale manufacturers will have gone, and we will find a shortage and a big spike. It's inevitable. That's the lesson of history, and it's difficult to see any other future. Now, what is the single word? Let me tell you a story. I was late the other day to do a rehearsal in a place like this. I was staying in a hotel which had 500 stories, and I was on the top. And I was waiting for the lift, and nothing was happening. I pressed the button, and I waited. And in a moment, I was tempted to do something utterly crazy. Now, I know that you would never even consider doing this, but I was tempted for a moment to actually touch that lift button more than once. Now, okay, put your hands up if you have thought about it. I know that you would never do such a crazy thing. Okay, put your hands up if you have actually touched that button. Put up your hands if you've talked to the lift. Okay, yes, come on. I've discovered that a great number of people also talk to their cars, and all airline pilots talk to their planes. Come on, baby, it's time to fly. Now, what we discover is this: that while we can concentrate on all kinds of data and logic, mathematics, forecasting, and other stuff, logical things, analytical things, when we are under pressure ourselves, it's not long before we start to behave like totally irrational people. And what we discover, therefore, is that there is one word, this single word, that drives the markets actually more than anything else, and it's emotion. Or we are scared of that word because it has negative connotations, especially in the region here, right now. We fear what emotion can do. So I'm talking about intellectual curiosity, to learn. I'm talking about engagement in the workplace. I'm talking about a passion for change. I'm talking about a desire to make a difference. I'm talking about whatever it is that you feel strongly about that drives change within you, and that makes you feel you want to get out of bed in the morning and make something happen. And when you tap into these kinds of passions, these curiosities, these convictions, these commitments, then we see energy. And of course, confidence in the market. What is it that prevents the Chinese from spending their money? Or those big companies? Of course, it's emotion again. What is it that causes a young person to get out of bed, having been one of the 200,000 of your students sent abroad, and come thundering back to the kingdom to create a fantastic startup in biotech? It's emotion, not just the love of money.
And we see emotion in Eric Schmidt's world. It was interesting talking with him. Many of the questions you asked were emotional ones. They were to do with privacy. They were to do with the internet having a dark side. They were to do with regulation, all kinds of things, because the web is about more than techno. Put up your hands if you press the button quite quickly if a web page doesn't open. Let me give you an example. Suppose you're searching for something on Google, you press on the web page, and you wait. Put your hands up if you press the back button in less than 10 seconds, because life is too short to wait when a web page seems frozen. Put your hands up if you press the button in less than 10 seconds. Let me have a look. So most of you, put your hands up if you press the button in less than 5 seconds. 5 seconds, life's too short. So we see that in Saudi Arabia today, you lose 90% of your customers in 10 seconds. I just want you to remember that. 10 seconds for 90%. And actually 80% gone in 5. That's what you've just shown me. Why? Because life is short. Let me have a look at another one. Imagine that you are trying to get money back from the utility company because there is an error. You phone them up, you get through to the answering machine. It says, press 1 for accounts, press 2 for customer services. There are 18 choices to press. Put your hands up if you find that very annoying when they have stolen money from you. Okay. Put your hands up if you think it should be a social crime. They should pass a law preventing people from using such systems. Now, why is it that we feel these things? I'll tell you why. Because emotion is close to us. We think we're just rational, logical, analytical people. But if I cause you to wait for 5 seconds, you become very emotional. So this is very important because we heard earlier about ways to speed up the registration of a company, for example, from 2 years to 1 year. But actually what we're seeing is that even within 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week is already 1,000,000 years. Within 5 seconds, you have lost the will to live. So what we're talking about is a passion for speed, a velocity of change, and where you can shave off a week of a registration process, you increase your productivity and competitiveness a lot. If you can do it as you are already, as we heard from the speakers this afternoon, tremendous radical progress in registering things using iPad technology. This kind of thing, when you push it to the next step, will dramatically improve every aspect of your competitiveness. Believe me, it really does. It's not just the act. It's part of how people feel when they're in the country or when they are outside the country wanting to engage. Demographics will be, as we have heard, the biggest single driver of the future, really, apart from emotion. Show me the demographics of any country, I will tell you its future. And the good news is your demographics are great. I will show you in a moment how they compare with Italy, which is a disaster in comparison. We have 1 billion children alive today. 85% of all humanity living on Earth in 2025 will be living in emerging markets. That is where our growth is, which is why it is so right that so much of our conversation today has come back to emerging markets. 1 billion people will move from rural areas to cities in the next 25 to 30 years. 475 million of them alone in Africa. If you're looking for new industries, new opportunities, new venture partnership areas, new technologies that will drive the future, I would say here you have a cluster of them, and you'll hear a lot more about this tomorrow. We have a whole panel not only on health, we have one on cities and transport tomorrow. These are really exciting areas for Saudi Arabia's future entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. Now look at this. This is Saudi Arabia's wonderful demographics on this side, and here is the biggest nightmare you can imagine on the other. Let me explain. We have 5-year bars here, so we have the number of 0 to 5-year-old children, girls, boys in Saudi, 5 to 9s, 10 to 14s, and you can see that you have roughly the same number, huge numbers of people in each age group until the age of 39, and then suddenly it gets much less. That tells us that 39 years ago, people started having much larger families than today, and also that health expectancy improved, so babies lived more likely to survive. But on this side, look at this horror. We have hardly any children being born. It looks like the Italians forgot how to make babies about 30 years ago. You can see it just fell off a cliff. And we have this massive bulge of 45 to 50-year-olds who will soon be 60-year-olds, soon 70-year-olds, soon 80-year-olds, that are coming through that are going to need support, but hardly anyone to look after them or even to pay the taxes. Now, in Europe, where I live, what does this mean? It means, my friends, in Italy, you need 8 great-grandparents to produce a single great-grandchild. That's what happens when you only produce, on average, 1 child per couple. And although my friend here is laughing and thinks it's rather amusing, I have been to Rome recently, and it's not a joke there. In Italy, they will have, in 11 years' time, 1 million people over the age of 90. Enough to swing every election, and most of them will be very old women because men in Europe don't live quite as long. So we have 1 million older women over the age of 90 deciding the result of every election and every government policy. Does that matter? Well, it might. It might. It's important. So demographics really matters. When I say Saudi Arabia is a young nation, yes, we've heard that all day, but I'm just saying, look at the power of what we are talking about. So Europe will need to outsource to Saudi Arabia a whole load of tasks for young people to do because it hasn't got any more. You see, we've forgotten in Europe a simple fact. You either have to make babies or you have to import them. There's nothing else that you can do. And the trouble is, we don't like this very much, so we have in my country 2 policies. We say, keep them out. Everyone said that. All parties have said that for the last 20 years. You know, that's the official policy. You know the unofficial one? The unofficial one, my friends, is don't count them if they come in. And that has been the case. It's only recently that we've started to keep records because it's so embarrassing. Because politically it's sensitive. We need immigration because otherwise we will become as extinct as the dinosaurs, just like the Italians and the Greeks and the Portuguese and the Spanish. This is a serious issue. It's the same for the Chinese. The biggest difference between China and India is this. India has a Saudi Arabian picture full of life, children, and extended family. China, well, I was in Shanghai the other day. I actually saw someone with a double buggy, 2 children being pushed along the street. I took a photograph quickly in case I never saw it again. But in India, a young nation, full of energy, dynamism, just as Saudi Arabia is today. And you see this reflected in things like STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We've heard so much about education today because, of course, it is the future of this great country. And look where the education is happening. Just in these very important subjects which will drive our future, you can see the orange. The orange is all these STEM graduates from emerging markets, and the green is all the rest. America, Europe, Australia, Canada. You can see that the world is dominated by science graduates from emerging markets. Look here. This is China, this big bar. India, United States, Brazil, UK, and Japan. The orange is the additional growth in graduates every year just from 2010 to 2015. So, my friends, if you are in my country, in the UK, and you need a petrochemical engineer, the first place we have to think about is India, or China, or Saudi Arabia. You have the young people. You are training them. You have a superb educational system. You have talent. And that means either the jobs need to take place here, or it means those people will have fantastic job opportunities in other countries. So exciting stuff. But also, what a paradox that we have here in this country. 1/3, perhaps 25, we can debate 30%, 31% of, 20 to 30, 33-year-olds who are out of work available to us as a workforce. At the same time as countries like Germany, and not Germany, but Italy, and actually Germany is also aging very quickly. Other countries haven't got these workers. What an amazing opportunity for us to use to drive 30 years of prosperity and security. So Saudi Arabia will also become more competitive in relation to China as a fact. Why? Why is that? Because China is so last century. The idea of making things in China is becoming rather expensive. Let's have a look at the car industry. This industry is undergoing a revolution right now. The car industry is highly consolidated and automated. It's so expensive now that there is probably only room for 5 or 6 different car platforms on which all the models will be built. This is VW's. This will be the basis of 1 million vehicles, maybe 50 different models and variants of them, all on one chassis. Whatever car you drive, just look under the bonnet and you find the same thing. And why are they needing to do this? Because it requires so much investment, so many complex supply chains, so many clusters of specialties. And to make these clusters work in a rapidly changing world, they are starting to close down global supply chains. Why? Because they're too risky. I showed you all the disruptions. What happens when all your chips come from Thailand? And if it's not the weather, it's a revolution. What happens if your big manufacturing plant is in Russia and suddenly there's an embargo on any products being taken from Russia? So we're looking, the biggest companies in the world are bringing their manufacturing into regional clusters, and you see this here. If you look from 1990 through to 2011, I want you to look particularly at the light brown part, which is where there's trade between countries, but it's happening locally. So this is Saudi Arabia to UAE. This is UAE to Turkey. Maybe Turkey up to Slovenia. Maybe it's Saudi Arabia to Mumbai, wherever it is, but it's clustered, it's regional, it's tight. It's removed a huge element of risk. It's speeded up the whole supply chain, and it's got rid of another problem, which is China. China will see this year wage inflation and yet a gain of around 11%. Well, my manufacturing friends outsourced to China when it made sense, when maybe they got a 40% cost saving, even 50%. But you don't have to have 11% difference in wage inflation, or maybe even 9% between, say, Saudi wage inflation and maybe Chinese wage inflation, to erode that competitive advantage. And you only need a small switch in the Chinese valuation of their own currency, and again, we've lost a whole chunk more competitive advantage. So you can see why it is that even in Slovenia, I was in Slovenia just the other day. I was talking to the head of HR of one of their largest companies, and she had just done a very complicated calculation. She said, Patrick, she said, on paper, it looks great. But when I looked at all the added costs we had in Shanghai, the social security costs, you would not believe the number of hidden charges there are for a company like us employing people in China. And when I loaded all those up, and then the costs of me managing that team and my own time flying out, and then the risks of cultural misunderstanding, the time zone differences, the length, the transportation risks, and so on, I can tell you, even in cash terms, it is now cheaper for me to bring those factory jobs all the way back to Slovenia, where they went from 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Now, if that's true today, what about tomorrow? What about 5 years' time? And I promise you this, even if China wage inflation falls to as little as 5%, Slovenia's is virtually zero. So we will continue to see erosion of that capital advantage in places like China. Now, of course, there's more places to go than China. So Intel has just moved a $1 billion chip factory from China across the border into Vietnam, where wage prices are half what they are in China. At least they were. But guess what? Vietnam last year, 2 years ago, had an inflation rate of 25%. All kinds of things are going on. As economies are heating up, jobs are coming back. And we're seeing nearshoring on a very big scale. I've just come back from Mexico, which is boom time now for manufacturers because they're getting the jobs back from China. And when they do, in the Mexican cars they make are huge numbers of components from America, which are imported, built into a Mexican car, sold back to America, so everyone is happy. Why am I saying this? I'm just saying that there's green shoots of a manufacturing opportunity here for Saudi Arabia. It has not been here 5 years ago in this way. And I promise you, it's not in every sector. In some sectors, with highly specialized workforce, fantastic products, wonderful engineering, smart technologies, a little bit of government help, maybe with a free zone or something like that, I think we're going to see some very exciting manufacturing opportunities right here in this kingdom over the next 5 years. I'll give you another example. Ports make nations more competitive. Saudi Arabia has a 40% competitive advantage over any nation with no port. Why is that? Because, my friends, as you probably know, those of you who are in shipping, it costs in my country, it costs the same to move a container on a lorry 150 kilometers as it does to move the same container from Southampton in the UK to Shanghai. If you have a port, it's fantastic. The closer you are to a port, the higher the competitive advantage. And Saudi Arabia, you have a wonderful port. If you can reduce the shipping time for a company on a vital component by just 1 week, because you're closer than China maybe, but also because you trim some of the red tape and you do it all on the iPad and things, if you can trim 1 week, straight away you will increase your trade in some sectors by up to 26%, according to some very well worked out studies. And this is why countries like Brazil have spent $225 billion on new super hubs, combining rail and road and shipping and computerized ports, because they see this kind of infrastructure as one of the fastest ways to give a competitive advantage to their own industries. And of course, we've got fantastic opportunities also, not just for the big players, but for the little ones, and with this I'll close. There is a generational opportunity here for 1 or 2 million new jobs in Saudi Arabia at least, and they will come from low capital, highly innovative technologies. Let's have a look. Small tech, moving to big tech, the kind of things that Eric Schmidt said he would buy. They could be Saudi companies today, but bought by Eric Schmidt in 5 years' time. Laboratory, life sciences is a huge area. You'll hear more about this tomorrow. Astonishing innovation in biotechnology. For instance, repairing heart and brain and spinal cord using your own cells. This is a 3D manufacturer which can print human organs, print new human organs using your own cells in a bubble jet environment. Very clever stuff. You do not need big investment here. I am the chairman of a biotechnology company that builds nanotech robots. Okay, we build viruses, actually. Viruses are just nanotech robots. They don't need energy, they're just machines. They don't need food. They just contain genetic code. Viruses can deliver genes to human beings to cure disease. Do you know the entire company lives in a factory, in a laboratory about the size of 6 or 7 tables? It requires tiny amounts of capital to start biotech. You have the scientists already doing genius work in your laboratories across this country. You have entrepreneurs, you have PhDs. These are the kinds of things which are engines of change for tomorrow. Some of these companies will do fantastically well and will be bought by big pharma for hundreds of millions of dollars with relatively small investment, which could well come from your own sovereign wealth funds and so on. E-commerce itself is a tremendous opportunity. I won't spend time on that because you already heard about it from Eric Schmidt. I'll just say that the biggest issue there and the biggest opportunity right now, it could be for your own son, your own daughter, operating from a room in your own house, starting to produce new pieces of software, mobile apps, the next generation of location marketing devices. Because almost all e-commerce now in my country, most e-commerce is now mobile, and the same here in Saudi, it will soon be the case, there is tremendous opportunity for new kinds of marketing techniques which rely on knowing where the person is. And then combining mobile and e-commerce with banking. We've already heard about the banking sector here. What a tremendous opportunity for partnership, innovation, low-scale experiments, mobile apps. And then there's the three mega trends: the Internet of Things, big data, and cloud. You put those three together and you have an explosion. Here is the big data, the Internet of Things, where every piece of luggage is tagged, every component for an aircraft is tagged, 1 trillion devices, all in the world, all transmitting and receiving data, all online in a hyper-smart environment which no one really understands how to use. What an amazing opportunity for 100,000 new startups to try and help companies interpret this data. This data soon becomes very big data, the kind of data that some people here were quite worried about when we talked to Google about how they use it and how they store it. Well, let's find some morally right ways to use it. Let's find some Saudi Kingdom-informed ways to use this data. Let's decide on ways to use this data which conform with the principles that you hold dear about how you respect other people and how you think our world should live. Big data, the third one is the cloud. Put it all in the cloud. When you put big data, the Internet of Things, and the cloud together, you get the biggest target ever for cyber attacks and terrorism, which is why we've heard about that word twice already today. And by the way, the answer is not simple, but here's one box to tick. At least make sure that the stuff is encrypted on your hard drives. I don't care if you're a bank or whether you are an individual. Just make sure that you encrypt your stuff, so that when the person comes knocking on the door and gets in the back door and gets into the hard drive, there's nothing he can steal. I tell you this, if Sony had encrypted their stuff, they wouldn't have lost a single thing to the North Koreans. It's so simple to do. So and how difficult is it to write a company that encrypts stuff and to create a company to do it? Relatively easy. It's the sort of thing that any one of your children could set up as a consulting program tomorrow to run encryption programs for people who have small businesses, or they have computers at home, or maybe they're large companies. Let's do it. Make the web secure. It's a silly gap. It should have been filled 5 years ago. So I hope you're getting the message that our world right now is full of stuff to do. There are really exciting opportunities. Yes, and there's other big things as well to do with green tech, and you're investing in those. But this is a world which could provide full employment for Saudi Arabia, I think, relatively easily. When we employ agile strategies, when we target emerging markets, when we train our young workers, when we encourage a new generation of entrepreneurs, when we look to undercut Chinese and other Asian rising manufacturing costs, when we look to promote new technologies, the biotechs, the infotechs, the nanotechs, and all the other future techs, then I believe, and also when we link it to the passions people have and the deep desire they have for purpose and to know that they too are helping to create a better world, not just for themselves and their families, but for the communities and for this entire wonderful kingdom. And with this, I leave you with great hopes for your future, for peace and prosperity for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's program. We encourage you to put those smartphones to use and download the GCF app. You can find this at our homepage at www.gcf.org.sa. Also, if you are attending the cultural event this evening, please come to the Sagia desk in the foyer to pick up your tickets. Thank you for attending our program today, and we look forward to seeing you at 8:30 a.m. for another insightful and informative day. Thank you.